The most important insight for me in reading Gandhi was I come from a political tradition. I go back to the 70s, the 1970s, and I consider myself part of that much longer political tradition going back to Marx, then the Second International, then the Communist International, the Third International. So that whole Marxist tradition. And the basic Marxist tradition, and I know it's going to sound very crude, whenever you say the basic and you try to reduce a vast amount of written thought and a huge historical experience. But I don't think it's unfair to say that the Marxist tradition consisted significantly of, there's this vanguard of people who, as it were, know the truth. Their truth is, as we used to say, it's scientific, it's as predictable and as susceptible to reasonable and rational analysis as the laws of physics. And this truth was, we called it Marxism, some of us called it Marxism-Leninism, some of us who are even more cultish in our political opinions called it Marxism-Leninism, Mao Zedong thought. I happen to belong to that third category. And we had the science in our possession, and that we were supposed to go out and enlighten the benighted masses suffering from all sorts of afflictions. We used to call it things like false consciousness, commodity fetishism, suffering from all these afflictions, and we were supposed to bring them the truth and bring lightness where there was darkness, enlightenment where there was confusion, and so on and so forth. And that was our political raison d'etre. But Gandhi had a very different understanding of politics. For Gandhi, politics was not trying to enlighten the masses per se, but to get them to act on what they already know is wrong. That a typical person, yourself, myself, from the moment you get up in the morning till the end of the day, you are turning a critical eye to everything around you. You're saying, that's wrong, that's unfair, that's unjust, that shouldn't be. We have a whole litany of injustices that we observe and express some sort of internal outrage or indignation over in the course of each day. For Gandhi, and most of those outrages are real, they're legitimate, they're not conjured in our heads. But for Gandhi, the challenge was not to bring enlightenment about injustice in the world. People already know the injustices. The problem is getting them to act on what they already know is wrong. And the purpose of politics, in particular non-violent civil disobedience for Gandhi, was that it was supposed to act as a stimulant to goad people, goad the indignant but still passive bystanders, to goad them into action, to get them to do something about what they already know is wrong. And in that respect, the Occupy movement was, in my ways, almost the quintessence of what Gandhi had in mind. First of all, the slogan that captured the imagination of masses of people, we are the 99%. Well, you didn't have to enlighten people about the injustices of the capitalist system, even though they didn't call it the capitalist system, but you didn't have to enlighten them about the injustices of the system. There was a very widespread, a pervasive opinion, especially in the last 10 years, that there's something profoundly wrong with this system, that there's a handful of people who are raking in lots and lots of money, and then there are masses of people who are not only not doing well, but doing worse than ever before. So we all knew there was something inequitable, unfair, unjust in the system. We didn't have to be enlightened to that fact by a vanguard. We already knew it. And that was the slogan. That's why the slogan, I think, was so successful. It synthesized in a few words a pervasive sentiment cutting to the heart, the core of the injustice of the system. The late Alexander Cockburn, he said it was probably the greatest political slogan since 1917, Lenin's slogan, bread, peace, and land. There's never been a slogan in the history of politics that so galvanized the population. And there's probably some truth to that. The second thing about the Occupy movement was that its tactics initially were designed, successfully so, to get people to act. In the case, for example, of the civil rights movement, a pivotal moment for the civil rights movement, especially for young black people around the country, was the scenes for, the Woolworths stores where people are sitting at the lunch counters and are getting beaten by the white racists. And a lot of young black people saw those scenes and they said, you know, I've been saying the same thing as these people. Now it's time to go beyond talk the talk and walk the walk. I belong there with them. And so that was a typical Gandhian tactic, the purpose of which was not really, and here Gandhi is a little bit misleading, I would say confusing. The purpose of the tactic was not really to break the hearts of the racist ruffians. No, I don't think I don't think Gandhi was naive enough to believe that was going to happen, though sometimes he said it, like he would say things like, we want to melt Hitler's heart. Well, I don't really believe he really believed that, but that's a separate issue. The main purpose of the tactic was to galvanize, to goad into action everybody who thought the same thing as those folks sitting in on the counters, the lunch counters, but weren't doing anything. And if you listen to the testimonies from the civil rights era, a lot of them were galvanized into action by things like that. And the same thing with the 99%. Well, I'm one of those people who didn't need anybody to enlighten me that the system is unfair. I've been saying that since I was about 13 years old, maybe a little younger, but let's say 13 years old. So we're talking about 45 years. I didn't need to be enlightened about that fact. What I needed was to be goaded into action. And I'm living in Brooklyn, New York, and I hear about the Occupy Wall Street, and these young folks are sitting in this place called Zucchini Park or something. I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. So I'm thinking to myself, well, that's terrific, but you know, I'm heading towards 60. My Woodstock days are behind me. I'm not going to go camping out anywhere at this point in my life. It's unseemly for me at my age, and it'll be embarrassing for the young people on their side. But then I hear this thing about this mass arrest of 800 people at the Brooklyn Bridge. And I'm thinking to myself, now wait a minute, Norm. This is the Brooklyn Bridge, 800 people are getting arrested and you're doing nothing? No, it's time to walk the walk. Enough talk the talk. And so that, I being sort of typical of the person that was finally goaded into action, it was that nonviolent civil disobedience. But the important point, as I said in Gandhi, was it's not a question of bringing enlightenment to people. The real goal of politics has to be getting people to act on what they already know is wrong, or what's incipient in their consciousness, like they're not yet there, but just a little bit more, and you can get them there, you know. That's what politics is about, and that seemed to make sense to me.